Hello everyone, and welcome to this, video tutorial series where I'm just going over Symphonic Arena and just sort of how to play it, the mechanics and whatnot of the game. And so right now the game's still pretty early in development. You can see this menu is very plain looking. It's just all placeholders. But so the point of this series is to, particularly for people who aren't really familiar with these kinds of games, to give them an idea of how to play it and to just kind of get in and start having fun with it. And so, like, primarily, the a lot of the feedback I've been getting is that some of the controls are a little difficult. Some of the systems and a lot of the fundamentals that are maybe a little more obvious to people who are experienced with fighting games and like Devil May Cry, like stylish action games, they might not be quite as familiar with people who aren't familiar with those things. Um, that's who this video is for. So, kind of just jumping right in. You have basic movements. This Hibiki, the main character of Symphogear, and you move around with the left stick. You have some basic attacks. You have 4 attack buttons: light, medium, heavy, and the symphonic attack. And just a unique property of the light attack is you actually have a 3-hit combo off of it. Just press the light button 3 times, and you have another one in the air. And by default, those buttons are just going by, I guess, Xbox controls. X is light, Y is medium, B is heavy, and L1 is the special or symphonic attack. And you also have the lock-on button, which is R1 by default. And that basically locks your character onto your opponent, and you can... So it keeps you facing. Like, if you try to walk while you're locked on, you'll notice that you stay facing your opponent. You can still run, sort of like forward or to the side, but if you try to hold back, or basically hold the stick all the way back, so like if you try to run backwards while you're locked on, you're actually going to go into a block. And that, it's a block, so you'll guard attack. If your opponent attacks you while you're blocking, you're not going to take damage, generally. So it's a good option to keep in mind. It's typically pretty safe. However, you do also have throws, which are, pretty standard thing in fighting games. But again, if you're not familiar with that, then throws are kind of a part of your basic rock, paper, scissors, where you cannot block a throw. And that was a throw. That's her basic throw. A few ways you can get around throws. You cannot throw an opponent that is airborne, for one, if you're on the ground. However, if you're in the air, you can throw an airborne opponent. But if you're in the air, you cannot throw an opponent that is on the ground. So that's sort of a limitation of throws. Also, if your opponent is in hit stun, meaning they're in their hit animation, then they cannot be thrown. So you can't combo into a throw. Just some limitations that are there, so you can't just be using throws all the time. I also noticed that you have this long recovery animation when you use a throw, meaning that if you miss, then you are vulnerable. So that blocking, throwing, and attacking are sort of like I guess you could think of it as a rock, paper, scissors, where typically if you block an attack, you can probably like punish your opponent because you blocked it. Although that depends on the attack. Some attacks are safe. It's a lot to go into, but just at a basic level, remember that You can block attacks, but you can't block throws, but throws have other drawbacks that make them less safe, or you can't use them in all conditions. They also tend to have a shorter range, so you need to be pretty close for a throw to actually connect. Another thing to keep in mind. And there are certainly other options that you can use if your opponent is too throw happy. Jumping, for one. Forgot to mention, but the jump is... the jump actually does have some invincibility, so it's a pretty good dodge all around. But particularly for throws, or against throws, when your opponent is trying to go for throws. You do also have a dodge, which you can use by pressing attack and jump at the same time, or any attack button and jump with any attack button besides S. So if I press jump and L at the same time, I do a dodge. You also have an air dodge. Although if you're in the air, you can only use one jump and one dodge before you land again. So that's something to keep in mind. Moving on, I did mention lock on before, and if you're locked on, you have directional inputs. So while you're locked on, if you press forward and light, you will use this sort of jumping kick, which is actually the same animation as the third hit of your light combo. But it's actually a bit slower on the startup. And if you hold back and press light, you'll get this uppercut. You have different moves depending on, forward, back, or if you use your different attack buttons. And this is something that takes some getting used to, because again, you have to hold the lock-on button, hold the direction, and press the attack. And you can do it once you get used to it, you can do it pretty quickly. And start doing more intricate combos and such. But just something to be aware of is just at a basic level, hold lock on a direction and attack button. Now you do also have back to forward inputs, which involve pressing while you're locked on, input the direction, input your left stick back and then forward. And you have different moves off of that, with different properties. This input in particular seems to be hard for a lot of people, so it does take some practice. So don't worry too much about it if you aren't really consistent with it starting out. Maybe don't focus too much on those moves. Maybe focus more on the easier moves like your normals and your forward and back moves. Just some things to keep in mind. And beyond that, all of these moves have different properties, so you can experiment with them. There is a move list here in the pause menu that you can look at to see what moves she has. And there are a lot of them, and it can be a little overwhelming. So I don't... if you're new and starting out, you don't have to memorize all of them all at once, Just go in and play, press buttons, and figure out what buttons do what. And once you kind of have a basic understanding of, your very basic options, then you can go into the move list and see, okay, what else does she have here to play with? And I guess to kind of move on, so I mentioned she has her throw, which is, I don't think I mentioned the input, which is pressing two attack buttons at the same time. So you press a light and medium, or medium heavy, or light and heavy. Any of those inputs will give you a throw. So I should actually clarify, that's any two attack buttons besides S, or your Symphonic attack button. But your other three attack buttons, just press two of those and you'll get a throw. And you can actually, if you do the back to forward input with a throw, that actually gives you a super. And if I change my settings here to actually have my health and meter normal, you'll see that bar that's below my health bar. That's actually my super meter or my phonic gain meter. This attack uses half of that bar, and it's basically it's a super. It has really fast startup and it's fast. It covers a lot of distance and it moves pretty quickly. So you can combo off of it in a lot of ways. So if I just put my, I'll just turn the health and meter back on so it's easier to demonstrate. But for example, I can combo off of the throw, which there aren't very many ways to combo off of that throw, but the super is one of them. It just, it's a very good tool in a lot of cases. And that was most of what I wanted to talk about. There's also the tech, which is a tech is essentially a way of breaking out of a combo when it's starting to get a little long. So if I can sort of demonstrate here, what looks like a very cheap combo is I can just mash medium on an airborne opponent and they'll pretty much stay stun locked. However, because I'm mashing the same attack, my opponent can actually break out of that combo pretty quickly by teching, which you do just by pressing jump. And you can actually hold the direction to tech in a direction. So you see that bar underneath the combo counter, which indicates how long you're in stun. And if you're in the air and you're in stun, and that bar goes away, that means you can tech out of that animation and recover and do something else. It's not perfectly safe though, like you are still vulnerable to being thrown during that tech animation, so you do want to be a little careful and not super predictable. That's not really something to worry too much about starting out. Just basically know that it's a tool for getting out of a combo. However, if you're on the ground, suppose I'm mashing medium while you're on the ground, it's a little simpler. You can actually just block or do anything else once that bar goes away. So, sorry, it's hard to control two characters at once. Once that bar goes away, I can just block and jump or a few other ways to deal with this. It's a little bit hard to just jump out of it, but I mean, if you're blocking, then you're not taking damage. You can do something else, like do a faultless defense to push them away a little more, or you can jump, but it's hard to get the timing right, or dodge. But there are a number of things you can do. I guess something that is worth mentioning then, if you do find yourself in that situation where your opponent is blocking, you can actually press 2 attack buttons to do this faultless defense, which will actually slowly drain your meter. You can't really see it now because your meter, because of the training mode setting, but this would slowly drain your meter. However, notice that it pushes your opponent away farther than normal. And what this means is that it makes it easier for you to dodge or jump out of the way or counter them if your opponent is just mashing. That's a little bit more of an advanced thing, but it's, I guess, a situation you can encounter even, if you're just starting out and playing against your friend who's also starting out. They might be mashing. You can do that to get out. So again, the input for that, and you'll notice that you have this sort of gold aura around you when you're using it, is just while you're blocking, hold 2 attack buttons. So it's basically lock on back throw. or while you're holding block, hold throw, and that will give you this faultless defense. It's a Guilty Gear sort of thing, like it is taken directly from Guilty Gear in a way. Um, it has some other properties, but it's really useful for just creating some difference if your opponent keeps hitting you and you're stuck in block stun. I think that's already kind of a lot of material to cover for a basic video. There are a lot of like combos and things that you can sort of experiment with. I guess just to top this off, a very simple combo if you want to just like do light, medium, heavy, and then link that into a super. A very simple combo there. Lots to experiment with. A lot more mechanics and things that I can go into in future videos, but this is sort of just sort of a beginner guide if you're not familiar with these kinds of games, to sort of maybe help you get an idea of the mechanics at a very basic level. And hopefully this helps anyone who's been having trouble with the game or hasn't quite understood the game, how it functions. Just go in and practice and kind of press buttons and you get a feel for things. But I guess that's it for this video, so thanks for watching and have a good day.